After World War II, Allied Command in Japan developed a new agency to help manage terrorism and violence within the Pacific region. The agency was staffed with ninjas, and they were initially tasked to handle domestic affairs. Eventually, that program grew to its current form, managing 20,000 ninjas across a range of domestic and international affairs. One of those ninjas happens to be Kuro. He is to infiltrate Koden High and deal with threats that can likely spark a war in Japan's capital. In the process, he meets new and old faces.
What the hell is even that?
And they all have their experiences when it comes to fulfilling missions. Kuro, the smelly, ugly 17-year-old high school loser, is now poised to be the next line of defense against a potential surge in foreign assassins invading Tokyo. Now the weird runt must blend with society and also burst bubbles and fight crimes. In a certain demolished city, some groups of soldiers arrive ready for action, but they show up late like the African police force. Upon getting into a building, they see a man on the desk whose head has been chopped off like sashimi. Upon studying the corpse, they realize that his thumb was also absent despite holding a controller which was suspected to be a detonator. The leader concludes the work to be done by a ninja and also points out an origami on the desk, while one of the subordinates complains about not having to see ninjas in action. His boss scolds him that he could have seen the pearly gates quickly if he came across one. Meanwhile, in a school in Japan, some students warn a barefooted one which they invited to the rooftop with them to watch his step. But the loser still steps on a gum. The long-haired guy amongst them calls the barefoot Kumogakure Kuro. Isn't Kumogakure the hidden stone village in Naruto? The guy casually speaks to him since it isn't their first time meeting. Kuro, in return, sees that Glasses' face is patched up and wonders how his scar healed. Glasses, in turn, says that he covered it with makeup. Kuro, who looks like he spent all his time in the trenches, spots a cute blonde with a nose mask and asks about her. From their conversation, he learns that she's Suzuki. He then cuts chase to business, asking them why he was called to the rooftop to meet them. Glasses then felt like it was a cool idea for them, and I'm glad Kuro took the word out of my mouth this time around. He asks if the fools think it's some kind of shounen manga, knowing fully well that they can easily be spotted by their ops. While Suzuki and the teddy-holding high schooler are not familiar with the term, Glasses, who goes by the name Hebe, called it one of the items on his to-do list. Kuro then speaks to Mummy's boy to confirm the situation, and the student points out that their opponents, who happen to be girls, are on a nearby roof, just like them. He then explains that the girls are called the rear enders. Kuro, who spots them, realizes that they are some bunch of fugly-looking gyaroos.
Oh, hell no!
Immediately, Kuro asks his new crew who the strongest is, but when nobody speaks up, he takes the title for himself. He then questions the feeble boy for their opponent's strongest, and the child selects the toughest-looking freak, but Kuro tells him that it doesn't work that way. He then points at one with mascara and picks her due to his gut feeling from reading Dragon Ball Z. Speaking codedly, he asks Mummy's boy for a laser pointer as he prepares to do battle. He then explains that their real enemy is the director of their school. He then jumps down the railing and lands like Spider-Man. Before his match, he wonders how he ended up in the situation. Mofo forces us to go back to the 22nd of July when he still lived as a shut-in. It was a hot summer, and he had been practicing how to aim needles at the ceiling using straws. After several attempts in several positions, he grades himself like an elementary school teacher. After lying in his room, bored, he gets an unexpected visitor. Kuro instinctively takes a guarded position, but the man shows him a package and lets himself in. As they spoke, Kuro noted that he couldn't sense his presence earlier and concluded that he was a career ninja. The crazy fella who made himself at home in some stranger's house has already checked around and seen that Kuro doesn't have a fridge. Kuro explains that he shares a fridge with his next-door neighbor.
That's true.
Down to business, the career ninja informs Kuro that so many non-career ninjas have been failing to get jobs, and some have considered running away. Kuro, who happens to be one of them, says that he just needs a job. The shut-in ninja, going a complete 180 from his character, ends up being assigned a job. As the delivery man talks down about how Kuro's clan fell off like Gwen Stacy did from the clock tower, Kuro tries to grab a toothpick from falling off the ceiling. His hand is easily parried, and he is mistaken for trying to attack the delivery man's eyes. After clearing up the air, the man gives him a 10 out of 10 point. After the man leaves, Kuro opens the box and sees a school uniform with a hoodie. He puts on the hoodie and realizes that it covers his face, leaving him to look like some UK gangstar. Shortly, he dials the land phone to Kodan High to talk about his transfer into the school, but he stops after realizing that it's a job handled by parents. He then decides to go downstairs to speak to the only woman in his apartment about it. On getting there, he sees that she's in the bathroom, so to get her favor, he does as she tells him to. After completing his mission from her, he borrows the drunkard, and she plays the role of a mother figure in helping him secure a spot as a transfer student to Kodan High. After the call, he thanks the drunk woman who he calls Kawato, and she starts talking about how she has played the role of a stepmother in clubs. She then asks for drinks, and it makes me start to feel for her liver. Kuro, on the other hand, decides to borrow some from his neighbor's fridge. Upon crawling back into his room, he hands Kawato a beer. The curious boozer questions him about how his room is connected to his neighbor's, but he says it's been that way since he moved in. Once they are settled and they begin to drink, Kuro asks her about the transfer exams he will be taking. He specifically asks about English, since he sucks at it. But the person he happens to be speaking with dropped out of high school 3 days upon resumption, hence he got no solid answer. She then asks him about his mom, and he explains that according to his dad, his mom said troubles here after he was born. The dad misinterpreted his name for trouble, and ended up signing the paperwork under the wrong impression. The translation of his name meant ninth child, and the puzzled drunk asks him about it, but realizes that he is an only child. He then makes her laugh by telling her about his friend with the name Miracle, who got struck down by lightning. As Kawato laughs her ribs out, she questions Kuro about his age, and he tells her that he is 17. Instead of this bitch to snatch the alcohol from the minor, she chuckles some more due to always believing that he was older. He then makes her happy by pulling off a Doraemon reference and firing toothpicks at a bottle. Later that night, when the drunk has passed out, Kuro carries her back to her room and watches her snore like a truck engine. He then places his neighbor's beer cans amongst hers. As he heads upstairs, he sees his drunk neighbor jubilating about landing a job as he walks to their residence. The neighbor, Ono, who almost spots him, walks into his apartment and immediately calls out to Kuro after realizing that his beer is gone. Unfortunately for him, Kuro had already hidden himself, so it's as if he wasn't present at all. The following day, Ono accuses Kawato of taking his drink. He then shows her his name written underneath the empty can he found in her room. To his surprise, she comes up with an excuse as easy as breathing by saying that she used the same name when she worked as a bar hostess. The geezer doesn't let it slide, so he tries threatening her about calling the cops, but at that moment, he knows he messed up. Kawato decides it's a good idea after all. She found him with her underwear some days back. The dude tries denying it, and as they argue back and forth, Kuro locks himself up and watches some film. Back to the current time, he looks up at Miss Clownface and sees her staring down at him like some maggot. Without wasting much time, she does a little bit of parkour before landing like Peter B. Parker. Meanwhile, the delivery man speaks to another person in a van about the ongoing incident in the school. He asks the person why he wasn't briefed about it, and the man says it's partly because he doesn't take apprentices. The delivery man then retorts due to having one apprentice called Onikobe, but the man disregards that one due to the apprentice being a serial killer and too dangerous to be let into the country. Fatso then asks the delivery man about the 4 genin they sent to Kodan High. Genin is the lowest rank of a ninja. If you're familiar with Naruto, there are 3 ranks, Genin, Chunin, and Jonin. The man speaks of how Kuro doesn't have any records compared to the other 3 genin that they trained. He then explains that after doing a background check on Kuro, he discovered that he spent his time lazing all day, and even suspects him of being a NEET. As Kuro and Clownface are about to do battle, Mr. Delivery Man forces us into a backstory to show us Kuro's capabilities. Back on the 23rd of July, a foreigner arrives at Japan's embassy and starts mouthing off to find ninjas. Bro had his umbrella strapped on like some katana. After being quizzed, he says that the reason he came to Japan was to be a ninja. He looked like an adult otaku who finally arrived in his dream country. The interviewer at the embassy decides to tease the otaku a little when he is asked where he can find ninjas. This makes the foreigner swing his umbrella around like some katana. If I knew this man, I'd straight up deny his existence. The interviewer finally gave him a warning that he should be careful because of how conspicuous ninjas are. The man advises him that he won't find ninjas dressed like one since they'll be trying to hide their identity and blend with the crowd. Back to what had happened at the beginning of the episode. After the war in the Pacific, theater drew to a close. Upon arriving in Japan, the Allied General Headquarters issued Special Order 1, demanding the Imperial Forces and Ministry of Home Affairs to provide the roster of affiliated ninjas and their surrender. Securing the Japanese ninja, who had been the most consistent threat throughout the war to the Allied powers, was considered to be crucial in the US. MacArthur had come under an attack by ninjas during his station in Japan, only for the situation to be resolved by a faction of pro-American ninjas. Later on, the majority of the organizations were dissolved by the government headquarters. But in the 7 decades following the war, during religious and ethnic wars, the ninjas, thought to be extinct, demonstrated in the front lines by performing assassination and sabotage missions in absolute secrecy. These ninjas have infiltrated the majority of Japan's public and private institutions, where they monitor people in secret. The ninjas have been rumored to be around 200,000. Back to the fight scene with Kuro and Miss Mascara. As they approached each other, Kuro tells her to surrender quietly if she wants to guarantee her life, but she gets pissed at his cocky behavior and decides to bring out a knife. Miss Clownface takes a stance as if readying to fight, but Kuro tells her to check her arm. That's when she notices a laser pointed at it. He then scares her shitless by bluffing that they have support from the sky that can blow off her arm. Meanwhile, at the van, the two adults were discussing how the ninja wannabe foreigner caused so much ruckus that it brought the attention of the top brass to his case. The top brass selected a handful of genin to handle the otaku. The fat man in the vehicle now does a deal reveal, and we discover that he was the one who interviewed the foreigner. Back to the 23rd of July, after the interview, the foreigner speaks to himself about wanting to meet a ninja so badly. As he crosses the street, he wonders where they are. Meanwhile, some homeless-looking dude runs to a park and starts rambling to kids and offering them breast milk. The children simply play around him and consider him to be senile. As for Blondie, he gets tired from all the work and decides to take some rest. Fortunately for him, he sees the image of a gate on the foot of a lamppost, and it spikes his curiosity. The foolish man starts ogling at it in broad daylight and even suspects it to be the work of a ninja since it kind of looks conspicuous. Before long, he starts searching for what's not lost, looking for more clues. Eventually, he comes across a message, warning people not to pee on the walls of the area. The fool then calls his friend, who happens to be with his daughter at the time, to ask for advice. But his assassin of a friend doesn't help matters, and the otaku concludes to do as the message says. He believes that if he can cut 3 disobedient people's rods off, then he'll automatically be a ninja. He believes he can save his daughter that way. Later that night, after Kawato has sobered up a little, she declines her offer to be driven home and decides to branch at a convenience store. On her way home, she sees a man peeing on the wall, and he irritates her, so she insults him. Out of the corner of her eye, she spots a foreigner and walks past him. The man's glasses shine like kabutos under the streetlight as he readies himself for the night. In Ono's apartment, Kuro spots him putting on Kawato's bra, so he questions him.
What?
Oh my God!
Rather than yelling at the geezer, he asks that they discuss it over some drinks. At first, Ono denies having some drinks since he believes Kawato to have swiped some, but Kuro points at some plum brandy, which Ono's mother usually leaves him with. After settling down and having some shots, Ono confesses as to how he came across Kawato's bra 2 weeks ago. We are having a flashback inside another flashback. 2 weeks earlier, Ono was fired from his job so he staggered home due to being drunk. On getting there, he spots a bra that is being carried away by a drone, so he picks it up. He then checked around to confirm if no one was watching him, but he found a kid whom he described to be a ghost due to how white he looked. Kuro then corrects his story by saying it must have been a teenager who controlled the drone to get the bra. He clarifies that he has been seeing the kid peeping at Kawato's room recently. As the man tries to Tsukomi his way around the case, Kuro asks him why he did not report the case to Kawato, since if he did, he wouldn't have been accused like he was earlier. Immediately, Ono stiffens and starts sweating buckets. He then comes up with an excuse that he was terrified due to the ghost he saw and ended up rushing into his room. He even said he became nauseous and emptied his tummy on the bra before taking it to be dry cleaned the following day. Meanwhile, in reality, he did unspeakable things to the bra, and if said, he'd be given another name. Ono continues saying that due to the bra being clean, he concluded that returning it that way would raise suspicion, so that's why he hasn't given her back. Kuro then informs him that his cock and bull story doesn't explain why he is currently wearing Kawato's bra. The following day, the people around see writing on the wall with blood saying that the writer wants to be a ninja. Immediately, the news of a man whose rod got cut off aired online. While listening, Kawato realizes that the incident happened nearby. Later that night, the senile geezer who always tries to offer milk to kids in the park goes to a wall to take a leak. The blondie decides to continue his mission to become a ninja. He sneaks up behind the senile man and imagines his rod to be some Odin so that he won't be grossed up while cutting it. After completing the task, he realizes it was a piece of Odin he ended up cutting off. Immediately, the geezer leaps away and crawls on the wall like some cockroach before creating enough space between them. The otaku becomes happy for not needing to cut 3 people's rods off to come across a real ninja. With his elevated spirit, he pulls out a karambit knife and attempts to cut the old fart. As he throws some strikes, the man weaves his attacks like he's doing some hip-hop dance moves. He then hits the Yankee on the foot and grapples him like it's jujitsu. He ruptures the dude's right hand and creates some distance. The otaku switches the weapon to his other hand and tries attacking him, but he gets cake smacked across his face. As the loser hits the ground, he changes strategy and pulls out a Glock, firing it at the old man's tummy. The bullet hits, but it doesn't cause a wound. Almost like the tummy repels it like Luffy. He then thinks about how ninjas move in 3-dimension. He then aims at the old fart and takes some shots. While the old ninja tries to monkey his way out of it, he gets hit in the shoulder. The old man then chants some voodoo, and his upper body becomes invisible. He then decides to turn tail and bail. After the grunt leaves, the white man suspects him of using ninjutsu, a camouflage technique to be precise. The dude then realizes that ninjas live up to their expectations. The same day, 8 hours prior, Kuro tries on Kawato's bra like he is a queer. He then concludes that taking them off is easier than putting them on. He continues soliloquizing about how the urge to steal the bra came to him after Ono had left. Again, the delivery man spots him as he tries unhooking the bra and comments on him being bored. Kuro does a front flip on instinct to create a distance between him and the career ninja. The man asks him if he hasn't spilled any classified info since he notices Kuro to be speaking a lot to himself. Kuro immediately denies and lies through his teeth that he simply happens to be practicing the role of a weirdo that will make people distance themselves from him. The delivery man then checks out Kuro's hoodie after realizing it was inside the package he gave to him the last time he visited. He sees that it is blade-proof and bulletproof. After checking the tag, he sees the term Marishiten 4.0. Shortly after, the two have their seats. This time around, Kuro asks him if he'll like a drink, but the man blatantly refuses due to the weirdo's outfit. Immediately, they get down to business. He asks Kuro for an update on his mission, and Kuro starts explaining. The bra-wearing freak mouths how he is to infiltrate a high school, and he has been on standby until the entrance exam, which happens to be on the coming Saturday. The man concludes that he has 3 days of free time, so he asks him if he has heard of the Narima slasher. The dead fish-eyed teenager affirms, and he is immediately given the mission to dispose of the ninja wannabe within 3 days. He hands him a package and leaves the vicinity. After Kuro has gone through the package, he holds a police rod. He then wonders why the career ninja froze when he checked his hoodie. He concludes that there's more to it. Back to the fight between him and Miss Mascara, he uses the illusion technique and the entire hoodie becomes invisible. The clown of a student starts mouthing off about the product being the latest technology. She goes on, rambling like a geek who had the glance to witness the latest PC unboxing. She then tries to attack him, but he evades easily, like Tendo did to Hinata's twin lion fists. Immediately, he counters by swatting her eyes like a fly. She drops her blade, and he latches onto her hand and jumps like Ichigo in Bleach, opening one before crashing it on the railing, dislocating her hand like a chicken wing. In the delivery truck, the delivery man finally calls the embassy ninja by his name, Ozu, and asks him if he has seen a Marashitan 4.0. The plus size says the little he knew about the product. The delivery man then recalls Sasama hinting about the product. He then forces us through a backstory. On the 25th of July in the afternoon, a girl goes about in the park, looking for a foreigner that fits the description of the ninja. The senile man who got jumped by the otaku hears the girl and asks her what she's up to, but she tries hiding info from him. As she interacted with him, he saw bruises on her hand and tried to be caring by requesting to offer her milk. She gets creeped out and runs off, continuing her search. As for the homeless-looking geezer, he sees the delivery man looking ahead of him. At a shrine, the girl walks around calling and looking for the ninja wannabe and eventually spots him under a shrine and tells him he is lost. He asks her if she's a ninja, but she says she is just playing hide-and-seek. The man starts talking about how he lost against a ninja despite using modern tools. He then asks her to give him the last water he'll drink before dying. She gives it to him, and the fool feels alive. He then confirms her to be 10 years old and explains that he recently got a daughter. He says he wishes to see her grow, but he isn't sure he can due to failing a mission. He then explains that the ninja won't let him escape, and his employers won't forgive his failure. At the park, the old man known as Sasama is greeted by the delivery man. Sasama calls him Kato and offers him some milk, but he declines. He then asks Sasama why he stepped down, and he explains how the fight in Timbuktu was nasty. He continues saying Kato is one of the people he trusts, and due to that, he can keep moving forward. He then talks about how he kept on moving forward, and there wasn't a rest from him. It felt depressing, hence he stepped down. Kato refers to him as first-class Sasama, but the man puts the word former right before the title. He then explains that it's been 70 years after the war had ended, but the Prime Minister hasn't made use of his priority command over them. He starts asking rhetorical questions about why they are not under civilian control by the government. Kato concludes that it has to do with UN Sasama reaches the same conclusion and vanishes like he is going to get some milk. Before then, he says the term, under ninja. After bringing us back to the present, Ozu confirms from him that everything is okay. The fight draws close to an end, but Mako decides to bet on her rotten luck and tries to stab Kuro, but her slow-ass dumb move is an easy read for Kuro. He plays dirty like a lowlife and pokes her eyes, but that wasn't enough for him. He then grabs her hand and breaks it like crunches using the building rails. In response to the tremendous pain, Mako screams like a rat caught in a cheese trap. After playing dirty like a prick, Kuro jumps down from the building and walks away, feeling like a champ. Meanwhile, Suzuki, Hachiya, and Hibi watch the fight from above and discuss the ruthlessness they've just seen from Kuro. Hachiya mentions that Mako's hand is most likely shattered, but Hibi, the smart pants, says her hand is just dislocated because Kuro had it over the rail, and if Kuro were serious, he would have snapped the dummy's neck. After that, Hachiya volunteers to take Mako to the nurse's office, but Hibi quickly asks if he knows seduction arts. However, Hachiya didn't like that term, and he corrected him that he is a grade 2 operator in romantic entanglement actions, which is still lame if you ask me. Down the building, Kuro hears a voice while walking, asking Yamada if she heard a scream coming from above. Strangely, Kuro recognizes the voice as Ada's. Throwback to July 24th, Ada stands in front of an apartment building, staring at the bra his punk ass failed to steal hanging from the wall. Deep down, he knows it's a trap, but his pervy mind won't let him let it go. His mind wonders if the bra owner is waiting on the other side of the window, with no bra on. Sadly, he's not going to find out, because Kuro has been waiting for the little shit in his invisible cloak like Harry Potter. He then sees the perfect opportunity, as Ada is about to pick the bra and shoots him with a taser. As a result, Ada faints and pees himself like a scared dog, but Kuro becomes visible again. He then figures out that the battery doesn't last very long, and it's going to be a tad bit tricky figuring out when to use the invisibility. After a while of sleeping, Ada finally wakes up, but instead of repenting, the good-for-nothing geek starts having a vision of the bra owner calling him for nasty business. Afterward, he notices an old geezer beside him, but he feigns ignorance. The old geezer, whose hairline keeps running from him, tries to get Ada to thank him for his generosity, but Ada won't budge. Soon, Kuro enters the room and brings Ada some eggplants to eat and recover from the earlier shock. However, Ada refuses to eat the eggplant, claiming he doesn't like pickled food, and Kuro tells him he feels the same way after tasting the foods the old geezer's mom sends him. That statement hurts the old geezer, Ono, and he calls Kuro rude for making fun of his mother's cooking. Then, Kawato comes in, drunk as a skunk and looking fine as hell in her short jean skirt. She sits beside Ada and offers Omo a beer, but Ada the pervert couldn't keep his eyes off her, since he's never seen a more beautiful woman in his pathetic life. Soon she asks who the punk is, but Kuro says he found the bra and went out of his way to deliver it to them. She then thanks him, but Ada feels ashamed of himself. Later on, he decides to leave, and Kuro asks if he still wants the bra, but Ada refuses it, considering he almost became a criminal and all. However, Kuro threatens to call the police after discovering he's a high school student who doesn't know any better, but Ada begs him not to. Kuro then offers him a deal to help him find a blonde foreigner wearing a blue hoodie and glasses, and in return, he'll send him a nice picture of Kawato sleeping in her underwear. Meanwhile, at that time, the blood foreigner in question fights with a guy who looks like he doesn't miss Burger Day. During the fight, he shoots at the guy, but the guy dodges it and turns invisible, making the blonde foreigner realize he's a ninjutsu user. After Ada gets home, he's welcomed at the stairs by a little girl, Juna, who has been locked out of her home. Ada then tells her to help him find the blonde foreigner, and in exchange, he'll let her borrow his drone. The next day, some jobless kids find a skateboard and decide to take it, but Kuro, who's hiding behind a fence, claims the skate is his. The greedy kids, however, refuse to give it up, and Kuro if they could make a deal, like a couple of businessmen. Kuro then offers them a bra, and asks them to invest in their future by learning how to unhook it ahead of time. Simultaneously, Juna finds the blonde foreigner and takes him to her house. During their interaction, she tells him that she's not the house owner's daughter, so she sleeps in the bathroom, which makes the blonde foreigner realize she's been abused. He then asks if sleeping there is uncomfortable, but she tells him she got used to it after a while and offers him a cucumber. Meanwhile, Kuro decides to test out the skate on top of the room, like every teenage boy with stubbles. However, Kawato tells him to knock it off, but he tells her to join him on the roof. As usual, she brings along her beer cans, and Kuro lifts her, calling her a heavy in the process. Afterward, they both discuss about themselves and their situations. Kuro tells her he is a jobless shut-in who'd rather die than work. Also, the landlady had been the one feeding him, but now that she's bedridden, he is surviving on scraps and some of Ono's awful rice. He also tells her that he's trying to go to school because of a nosy relative all up in his business, and Kawato says she has one of those too. She then tells him about the time she dropped out of school and her egghead relative wouldn't shut up about it. Kuro then asks why she dropped out, but it is a bad memory, so she stays silent for a while before answering him. She then tells him that her parents died in 2010, near the end of February, and she didn't have time for school after that. Kuro, however, remembers the incident as the ninja disaster. After the story, Kawato decides to pee and walks off the roof. Unfortunately, her drunken head won't walk straight and she falls off the roof. At that moment, Kuro jumps from the building like a typical MC and catches her before landing on the ground. Luckily, his jacket saves his head from hitting the floor directly. Kawato then runs to call the ambulance, but Kuro, who's unharmed, realizes that the jacket has an airbag installed. Fast forward to September. Meiko's remaining crew watches as she's being dragged away by Hachiya, but they get ambushed by Suzuki. Within a short time, she incapacitates them with her gun and advises them to surrender. Meanwhile, Katu and Ozu discuss Suzuki being the first to engage the foreigner and how she's got a ton of ninja handles. Also, she graduated from the Ninja Technical School's Kunoichi program at the top of her class. Throwback to July, Juna brings the blonde foreigner over to Ada's house, and in return, he lets her fly the drone. While she flies the drone with the blonde dude, he decides to call Kuro. The drone, however, puts a thorn in Yoshida's back while having a meeting with Suzuki. Suzuki, who thinks she's doing a good job at disguising, thanks Yoshida for letting her read his manuscript. She tells him how touched she is about his depiction of the grief ninjas go through, and Yoshida's bald head is loving her flattery. Sadly, the praises are short-lived after she asks to talk to him about a few edits she's been thinking of. Meanwhile, Hibby walks behind a bald man and raps about dumb shit like an upcoming Kanye West. After hearing enough of his crap, the bald man tells him to shut the hell up, and as his master, Hibby listens to him. In Yoshida's room, Suzuki asks him to make changes to almost every chapter of his book and even removes some of the chapters. It all seems like a hassle for Yoshida, and he wonders what happened to all the praises from earlier. Suddenly, Suzuki gets a text about a mission to capture the foreigner who's in that building. She then confirms the name of the apartment building with Yoshida and tells him to make the corrections before 3 p.m. the next day. At a shop, Hibby's bald master tries to get a smoke and matches from his father, who has more hair than him. After getting his multicolored matches, making him feel like an antique man, he calls Hibby, who is trying out even more dumb lines. He then tells Hibby that it is time for his first mission at Murayama Flats, and he should consider everyone he runs into an enemy. After hearing the news, Hibby becomes excited to beat some losers up. At the apartment, Suzuki gets the location of the blonde foreigner, and she climbs up to the second floor like the ninja she is. However, the blonde guy sees her, and luckily, he's packing like a gangster in the hood. He then shoots her, but she dodges it, and the bullet hits the glass. In response, she throws a shuriken like a hidden leaf ninja, but the shuriken transforms into a web and knocks the blonde foreigner off the building. While on the ground, he isn't about to be caught slipping, so he reloads his gun and shoots at Suzuki the moment he sees her. However, she blocks the bullet with a shield already prepared beforehand. Juna then complains to Suzuki about her injuries, but Suzuki tells her to submit a complaint to a local courthouse working 30 days. She then threatens Ada to keep his mouth shut about what's happening, and the coward tells her he won't say shit. She then notices that the blonde foreigner is watching her with the drone and decides to catch him off guard. She removes her shirt and activates her invisible jacket, while dropping her baton close to where he is also. Not being able to see her through the drone's camera puts the blonde foreigner at a disadvantage, and he gets kicked in the face by Suzuki. After that, she grabs her baton and shoots him with a taser in an attempt to knock him out. However, the blonde foreigner doesn't faint and piss his pants like Ada the bowl-cut dude. Instead, he shoots her straight in the chest while struggling to resist the taser's shock. Afterward, Suzuki hits the ground and realizes that the blonde foreigner had electrocution conditioning, and she is messed up big time. On the other hand, the foreigner struggles to reload his gun and wonders if the bulletproof gel in her shirt can block his next bullet. He points his gun at her, and she stretches her hand at him like she's got mind control or something. While making the hand gesture, she decides to aim for his head next time and redirect his shot with her hand to prevent a critical wound. She doesn't have mind control after all. Her tenacity not to give up makes the blonde foreigner wonder if all ninjas are fixated on survival. However, a plot twist happens, and Hibby arrives with his cringe rap rhymes. He then asks for applause because he has arrived. In a town that appears to be under attack from a terrorist, a few helicopters fly across the bombed areas of town. Inside a building in the town, the terrorist talks with his associates about taking down the Yankees with him, but suddenly, he sees a strange figure with a sword in a camouflage. He sees the blade glint and quickly grabs the detonator. However, He's not faster than the ninja, who swings his sword swiftly and gives him the justice he deserves. Afterward, the Yankee's army breaks into the room and sees the terrorist's corpse. After seeing it, they deduce that nobody else could have pulled off the feat aside from a ninja. Meanwhile, the ninja hides in camouflage like a rat and communicates with Kato, the ninja chief. Kata apologizes for bothering her mid-mission, but proceeds to ask the version of Marashitan she's wearing. She then tells him that it's the Marashitan 3.5, which is a custom-powered active camouflage. After the conversation, Kato realizes that the Marashitan that Kuro has is the latest model, and he wonders if that is where the front line for the war is. Meanwhile, at Murayama Flats, Hibi is still waiting for his applause, but it doesn't look like he's about to get any. Sensing that the blonde foreigner is distracted after pointing his gun at Hibi, she slithers away like a snake and decides to regroup. Without wasting much time, the blonde foreigner shoots Hibi in the chest, and he's about to die from the shot. However, he does a backflip like Jet Li, and the bullet falls to the ground. Shocked at the sight, the blonde foreigner wonders what ninjas are fully capable of doing. The fight begins, and Hibi kicks the blonde dude in the face, and he falls like a girl. Meanwhile, Suzuki picks up the drone controller and wonders why two ninjas have been assigned the same mission. Then she decides to help the target even at the risk of being chewed out by her master. At the fight, the blonde foreigner tries the Muhammad Ali jab, but a silly punch like that can't touch a ninja. Hibi dodges it and tries to kick him with a slick somersault, but he blocks it. Suzuki then flies the drone toward Hibi and he dodges it. He then wonders if Suzuki is the one flying it, and the blonde foreigner deduces that Hibi and Suzuki are not working together. To make things more fun, Hibi decides that he'll smash the drone, but Eita begs him from above not to destroy his toy. Hibi looks up after hearing his voice and wonders who the bowl-cut boy is. Outside the apartment, Ozu comes to meet Hibi's master, Taira, and scolds him for smoking on the street in Narima's ward. Taira doesn't mind his scolding and puffs his smoke like Joker from Fire Force. He then tells Ozu that he doesn't understand what their bosses are trying to achieve through the mission they've been assigned, but Ozu tells him they're better off burying their noses in their work instead of sniffing around for a reason. Suddenly, the bald man who fought with the blonde guy the previous night appears behind Taira and Ozu. They both know him as Sasama, and he tells them to never turn their backs on an enemy during war, or else they'll lose their lives. Ozu then asks Sasama if he's their enemy, but he just says some crap about knowing and dying meaning the same thing in their world. Meanwhile, a car drives behind them and ends up in the apartment building, but Kuro hangs behind the guy while on his skateboard. At the apartment, the man driving the car turns out to be Huna's father, and he starts screaming at Juna like a crazy person. He continues to scream at Yuna to go inside the house, and the foreigner realizes that the jerk is Juna's abusive father. While he screams like a maniac, Kuro takes the opportunity to spit a needle at Hibi, but he catches it and he knows it is Kuro's doing. At that moment, the blonde foreigner takes the initiative and kicks Juna's father in the face, which is the least the punk deserves. He then points his gun at him, but Suzuki flies the drone down in his direction to prevent him from hurting a civilian. However, he evades the drone and hops into the car and drives off. He then hits Hibi on his way, but Hibi lands on his feet like a cat. Then, the blonde foreigner reverses the car again to hit Hibi, but he jumps over the car this time. Following that, the car stops right in front of Yuna's father, and the blonde foreigner comes out to judge him for his abusive crimes. Sadly, Yuna calls her father, and the look on her face makes the blonde foreigner chase his mind about hurting the fool, and he drives off. However, karma is about to catch up to him too, because Kuro has been waiting for him in the car. Before the blonde foreigner could make any move, Kuro knocks him out cold with a single punch to the face, and the car stops in front of Sasama and the masters. The blonde foreigner then falls out of the car unconscious, and Taira checks the car to find out who took him down, but there's no one in sight. Meanwhile, a van passes by, and Kato, who's the driver, asks Kuro, hanging beside the car on his skates, if he's sure he doesn't want to claim credit for catching the blonde foreigner. Kuro, however, tells him that it feels like too much trouble. Back to the future, Mako and her crew have been subdued, and Hibi realizes he didn't get to do anything during the operation. Meanwhile, Ada asks Yamada about the scream, but she doesn't hear him due to her earphones. At the nurse's office, Hachiya apologizes on behalf of his people for hurting her, but she asks him why he's helping his enemy. He then tells her that he's curious about her, and she's surprised to hear that. He then tells her that she's always wearing her makeup and mostly alone, but she says she doesn't need friends. He then asks about her Kumadori makeup, which makes her surprised about his knowledge of makeup style. He then tells her that she has a complex about how she looks, but she tells him she doesn't want a lecture from him. He then turns his riz up a notch and tells her of his awareness that she lost to them on purpose, but her makeup is what he finds the most interesting. He then asks if he can come sit beside her, and she allows him. After sitting beside her, he makes her blush by praising her straight hair and wishing he didn't have curly hair. He then tells her that the color of her Kumadori makeup is usually worn by a protagonist, and it means that she wants more people to pay attention to her. Meiko then feels a bit uncomfortable, and Hachiya apologizes to her for being analytical. He then tries to make her feel better by using his ventriloquist skill to make his teddy bear talk. Through his act, Meiko can smile, and Hachiya tells her that they're both similar. He then explains that his organization kidnaps children and turns them into loyal killing machines, and he is no different. The only thing he had before his kidnap was the teddy, which is now a part of him. However, he promises to put it down if she will remove her makeup and show him her real face. She then tells him he has to, but Hachiya insists that he wants to know the real her, and she accepts. Inside a van, Kato inquires about one of Ozu's students, Hachiya, who didn't participate in taking down the blonde foreigner, but merely sat back and watched. Ozu, who's one sandwich away from obesity, tells him that Hachiya isn't a typical type of genin, and he explains what went down with the blonde foreigner to Kato. Back in July, Taira puts a bag on the blonde guy's head and takes him into the bushes for judgment. During their walk, Taira asks him which of the ninja he fought was the toughest. He then tells him that the situation was different each time, but the one waiting in the car was the scariest. He also mentions that he senses one other who doesn't know, and Ozu is surprised the blonde foreigner knew about Hachiya. After getting to the spot, Sasama asks Ozu to take off the blonde foreigner's bag and also help him take off his suit. Ozu then presses a code on his back and he removes the bodysuit he was wearing. Suddenly, the ugly bald Sasama turns into a pretty supermodel, making it a shock of a lifetime for the blonde foreigner. She then introduces herself to him, and she talks about ninja business with Ozu and Taira. Ozu asks her why she's been wearing the uncomfortable bodysuit, and she tells him that the ninja lab has been on her neck about testing a new Marishitan beta. She then tells him that they're not supposed to use any full-spec Marishitan inside Japan's borders, which is part of their deal with the police. Also, their freedom in Japan is the result of the trust they've built with the police, and it is part of what is limiting the arsenal they can utilize. Taira then asks if the Ministry of Defense is a problem, and she answers that they're fine with the current administration on the surface, and they're even working in ninja labs to co-develop weapons. However, the problem is the faction that descended from the old Imperial Army's Nakano military school, controlled by the Prime Minister. The existence of this faction has made their true enemy, Under Ninja, encourage rivalries and plot government downfalls. Ozu then asks if the Under Ninja are up to something, and she tells him it's their job to find out. They must start their investigation from the Nakano Army School, which is split into Futamata School and Egota School. Ozu then points out that Egota School used to stand where Kodan High School is currently built. This fact makes the masters fully understand the correlation, and why Genin has been sent to infiltrate the school. After the morning briefing, the blonde foreigner asks with fear in his eyes why they're talking about their business in front of him instead of ending him. Sasama then tells him that he's now one of them. She praises him for being able to fight on even terms with two Genin, and this has made their international organization want to recruit him as a shinobi. After he hears this, fear strikes his heart, and then Taira gives him a phone to call his family. Sasama then tells him that according to the shinobi code, he must cast away his old employers, his family, and his old life. He then calls his friend abroad, and he picks up while carrying his baby. He then asks him if he has successfully infiltrated the ninjas, but suddenly, the friend's leg gets slit by an invisible ninja, and the visible agent tells him to choose his last words carefully. Sadly, he didn't have the luxury of last words, and he fell. After the friend falls to the ground, the visible agent, Shimada, introduces himself to the blonde foreigner on the phone and tells him his daughter is safe. He then tells him that they're going to dismantle his organization, and if he wants to see his daughter, he should rendezvous ASAP and participate in the operation. After the call ends, Sasama tells him he has a mission now, and it's time for him to go for it. He then bows in front of her and accepts the mission. During the lunch break at Koden High School, a socially awkward girl, Noguchi, is in a bind after getting on the bad side of some groups she used to look down on. On the other hand is Sato, who had seen a boy with no torso through the window, and she wants to talk to someone about it so bad, but she's scared they might think of her as a delusional maniac, and she'll be more of an outcast than she currently is. Luckily for both girls, fate plays its hand, and they meet by the window. Noguchi then asks her what she's up to, and Sato tries to tell her about the boy with no torso outside the window, but changes her mind. Then, Noguchi sees Kuro outside and calls him by name, which surprises Sato, and she asks if they know each other by any means. Noguchi, who's a bit flustered at this point, tells her that technically, one might say they're acquaintances. Throwback to July, it is Kuro's first day at school, and he laments about how much he hates school. He then enters the building to meet the teacher, but he decides to dip after seeing no one present. However, he bumps into Noguchi, who lets him know he's in her way. In the hallway, Noguchi asks Kuro why he's not taking off the jacket underneath his blazers, and he says he doesn't want to. She then calls him annoying, like it's her business, but the teacher appears and calls her for her extra lesson. Noticing Kuro is also present, the teacher recognizes him as the transfer student, but he calls Kuro by the wrong last name. Kuro then corrects him, but Noguchi makes fun of his name. Kuro then defends his name like he's in a courtroom and tells her that his surname is always in the top 10. Of course, it is all bullshit, and after a while of shifting blame, the teacher decides to take them to a classroom. On the way, the teacher tells Kuro to shave his facial hair if he wants to enroll in the school, but Kuro tells him that his mother never lets him use any of the hair-removing devices in his house. His dumb excuse makes the teacher flustered, but Noguchi asks him what his mom does for a living. The teacher then tells her to stop being nosy and focus on her extra lessons so she can improve her test scores, or else she'll be held back. Noguchi then wonders how she's going to know what to do with her life when she's not even 18. In the class, Noguchi notices that Kuro is barefooted, and she gives him the creeps. Kuro, on the other hand, decides to sit next to her, and she complains he's so close. The teacher then decides to start Noguchi's lessons, and he gives Kuro his questions on math, Japanese, and English. After receiving the questions, he looks down and sees a bunch of seeds perfectly arranged beside his desk. He then remembers how Hachiya suddenly visited his house a day before. Hachiya brought some gifts for Kamado and Onu, but he jokingly charged them for it. Kuro then asks him what he wants, and the others also join in to know why the curly-haired kid is being shady. Hachiya then explains to Kuro that he was at the scene with the blonde foreigner, and he tells him to pay attention to the floor during his exam the next day. In response, Kuro tells him that he sensed someone else around, and he appreciates his help. For clarity, Hachiya explains that his initial plan was to finish off the blonde foreigner after he was exhausted from the fight at the apartment building. However, because of Kuro, his first battle never came to be, causing his master embarrassment, and he deeply regrets that. After the explanation, he stands up to leave, but charges them again jokingly. Before he leaves, he tells Kuro that he'll be waiting for him at the school. Back in class, Kuro realizes that the answers are on the floor, and he's ready to cheat his way into the school. Then, he makes a plan to fill in the answers first, and with leftover time, he'll go back to add enough mistakes to make it seem natural, like a skilled cheat. However, life doesn't go mostly the way it's planned, which makes Noguchi see the seeds and think they are bugs. The teacher then comes to check it out and says they're more like rice grains, but in an attempt to save his answers, Kuro tells him that the seeds give the nastiest rash, and he makes up a story about the seeds always being in twos, so that right after birth, the male and female pairs can reproduce immediately. The teacher then decides not to take any chances and asks Noguchi to get a room. While she goes to get it, Kuro cuts a part of his eraser and throws the rest on the ground. He then pretends to pick it up, but instead spits the cutout part of the eraser at Noguchi. Noguchi at the other end feels something brush her body, and she screams that someone touched her from behind. After buying himself some time, Kuro decides to fill in the Japanese answers, but the teacher steps on the seeds. After a while, the teacher cleans some of the seeds, and now Kuro's English answers are gone. Kuro then decides to protect the math answers at his feet, and then uses the ninja water escape technique. Suddenly, water starts gushing out of his legs, and Noguchi starts screaming at him for pissing his pants. She then runs out to get a rag, while Kuro gives the fakest excuse in the world. He says that his nervousness made him so thirsty, and he drank a bunch of deep ocean water. Soon after, Noguchi arrives with a rag and tells her sensei to take Kuro to the bathroom. Outside the class, Kuro puts on an Oscar-worthy performance and convinces the teacher that he won't be able to handle the English and math tests due to the embarrassment. However, he completed the Japanese potion, so he should at least get a minimum score. The teacher then tells him to go to the bathroom, but in a flash, Kuro switches back to his usual self, and it scares the teacher and Noguchi, who calls him a freak. Outside the school, Kuro laments that coming to school every day will be a huge pain in his ass. Just then, he sees a figure in the sun waving and looking forward to seeing him in the new semester. Noguchi then asks to walk back together, but she gets put off by his funkiness after he asks her to buy his stinky underwear. At Kuro's place, Kamado is spreading her underwear in the most bizarre place, but she hears Kuro's voice outside the door. There, Kuro asks Noguchi if she would like to come inside, but she just can't get her dirty mind out of the gutter. Kamado then comes out to meet them, and Kuro introduces her to Noguchi as his mom. Noguchi then flatters her by saying she's young and beautiful. Inside the house, Noguchi is given coffee while the others drink beer. Kuro then asks her about the hierarchy, bullies, and romantic situations in the class he's about to join. Noguchi then tells him about the 4 major girl groups and how she was kicked out of the most popular one for being a loser. Out of nowhere, Kuro laughs hysterically and then asks her about rumors in the school in general. Meanwhile, Kamado tries to turn on the television by hitting the head, but it won't budge. Noguchi then tells him that the school used to be a military base, and there's a tunnel leading underground in the woods behind the campus. The scary part is that some of the students who went in there on a lark ended up going missing. She also mentions that the school director is scary, because he goes around the school doing odd jobs like a homeless person. Finally, Kamado turns on the television, and a dumb show about old dudes is shown on it. At first, it looked like a regular show, but soon it turns dark, and they start ending themselves in the most brutal ways possible. Kuro, who's also watching, recognizes the show from a popular ninja broadcast company, Me and Old Dudes. In the show, they take criminals and accomplices that the police can't touch from Japan and abroad and execute them publicly. While he wonders why the show is aired on a civilian TV, he notices Kato's van is packed outside his house. He then goes to meet him, and Kato tells him to hop inside the van. The next day, Ada asks Kuro if he'll protect him at school, but Kuro asks him to pay for his service. On their way, they meet Yuna, who calls Kuro a shut, and Ada scolds her for being a naughty brat. Kuro branches at Noguchi's home, and she asks him how he knows where she lives. Kuro then tells her that he stalked her home the other day, which frightens Noguchi a bit. While walking together, Noguchi tells Kuro that Ada is being bullied by the guys, and because he tried to plant a camera in the girls' bathroom like a pervert, none of them will take his side. Ada then explains that he saw a microphone in the girls' bathroom when he snuck in to set up the camera, which is worse. At the crossroads, Kuro wonders if the microphone was planted by an ally or an enemy, but they suddenly see the school director across the road. The director then makes a countdown notation and points to his ear, while Kuro brings out a couple of coins, and it adds up to exactly 301 yen. He then looks at the director, but after the train passes, he disappears. Kuro then realizes that the director can use clairaudience, whatever that is. In class, the homeroom teacher introduces Kuro to the class as the new transfer student. But strangely, Ada is also standing beside him. The class notices that Kuro is barefoot, but that soon becomes history, after the teacher calls out Ada for standing when he's not a transfer student, and they laugh at his stupidity. On the way to his seat, Ada is blocked by a student who tells him to leave and come back in through the rear door. Kuro, who is behind him, pushes his leg and Ada ends up stepping on the rude bully's fancy shoe. Ada becomes scared and he apologizes to him, claiming it's not his fault. A while later, the rude bully asks Ada if he pulled that shit knowing his dad was an assemblyman for Narima Ward, but Noguchi shuts the fool up by saying his dad lost the last election. During the break, Ada tells Kuro that things are up to a great start, but his earlier stunt could have made him a shut-in again. Kuro then walks away from him but sees Hibi up the stairs staring at him like he ate his sandwich. Ada then asks who Hibi is, but Kuro tells him to wait behind while he follows Hibi. Fast forward to after the whole rooftop fight, Ada carries a package for Yamada, but he can't believe that she has finally spoken to him. While on the walk alone with the pretty Yamada, his dirty mind starts going places, and he wonders if he will finally pop his cherry. However, she leads him right into the bullies, and they welcome him with open arms. Then, she wishes him good luck and leaves him to the wolves. The former assemblyman's son, Azuma, grabs Ada and kicks away the empty package he's carrying. He then tells Ada that he has been seeing some nasty anonymous postings on social media targeted at him, and he asks if he knows anything about it. Ada tries to deny it, but they keep insisting that he is the culprit. Suddenly, they see the barefoot of a person covered in Ada's package and wonder who the hell he is. Azuma keeps asking who the weirdo in the package is, and Ada wonders if Kuro has come to save him. Azuma then asks Noheji, his lackey who he thinks is inside the package. He then kicks it, but Kuro doesn't budge. Azuma then notices that the person is in a sanshin stance, and Noheji tells Azuma to watch himself, because the person appears to know karate. Azuma, the curious yak, bends over to look into the package, but Kuro grabs his head and turns it, knocking him unconscious. Seeing this makes Noheji upset, and he brings out a baton which Ada realizes they are going to use on him. He then thanks his grace for having Kuro as his body, but he notices that Kuro is standing behind him. Kuro then tells him to listen carefully and make his left hand paper while his right hand is rock. However, Ada's brain is too slow to quickly process Kuro's instructions. Noheji then attempts to strike Kuro with the baton, but Kuro blocks it with Ada's left palm, and Ada screams like a princess. Then, he turns Ada's right hand into a fist and punches Noheji in the face, which puts him to sleep immediately. Then, Kuro's invisibility cloak wears out, and he realizes that charging it once doesn't last long. He then tells Ada to finish them off, but Ada is too cowardly to do shit to them. Before leaving, Kuro asks him where the director's office is, and he tells him that the director is usually in the boiler room. Following that, Kuro enters the boiler room, and the director has been waiting for him. He then tells Kuro that he's impressed with him for walking into enemy territory, but the invisibility he loves so much won't work on him. He then tries to catch Kuro off guard by stabbing him with the sword he had hidden in his clothes, but Kuro's reflexes are too fast. He dodges the attack, but a second attack comes in, and this time he blocks the sword with his hand. As a response, he blows a dart toward the director, but he deflects it with his sword. The director praises his precision, and also the Nien armor, living up to its expectations. He then points out that his hand would have fallen on the ground if he had attempted to block his attack with an older model. At this point, Kuro's sick of the chit-chat, and he tells him that escape has targeted him. Hence, he'll get put down if he tries to attack him again. Previously at the van, Kuro asks Kato why the popular show from the Ninja Broadcast Company was airing on a regular TV, and Kato tells him that a selection of households can view it normally. He then asks if it is part of the support offered to victims of the ninja disaster, but Kato tells him that there are times the aims of shinobi don't align with that of the government. Anytime it comes to that, the last option for shinobi is to get support from the citizenry. After the chit-chat, he tells Kuro that the command has decided to provide him with additional gear for his mission. He then gives him a couple of options, But Kuro, the greedy bastard, points at the loaded boxes, which belong to Kato. Kuro then asks for the motorcycle, and Kato tells him it is an Italian self-driving motorcycle with onboard AI called Teo. Kato then kicks Teo to come on, and after it comes on, he tells it that it has a new partner. However, Teo wants to be appointed as a female instead of a stubbled, grumpy guy like Kuro. After that, Kato asks him if he wants anything else, and Kuro asks for the targeting device for escape. Back in the boiler room, the director points out that another ninja incident is about to happen again, since a lowly genin has been authorized to use escape. He then tries to strike Kuro, but a blue light, projecting from the sky, stops his sword and cuts his sword. After that, Kuro leaves, but he sees Kato's van outside. He then tells him that the escape saved his life, but Kato warns him that he could have been hit because the escape isn't that precise. At the apartment rooftop, a cat has an inner voice and an awareness that it's a cat. It then gets hungry and decides to go to Kamato's house for a meal, but on getting there, it sees she's fast asleep like a drunk. It then scratches her legs to wake her up, and she starts laughing from the tickle. She then wakes up and sees that it's the cat she had named Shinobu. While Shinobu eats, Kamato switches on the TV and a rerun of Me and Old Dude, and she asks Shinobu to come watch it with her. At a glance, something about the show seems familiar to Shinobu, and he remembers the time he was killed by an invisible ninja. He then wonders why he's now a cat, and remembers how he was shipped off to a lab after managing to survive against the Rainbow Hound. Part of his brain was kept intact and transferred into the cat. Soon, Kuro arrives from school early, and Kamato asks him why. He then tells her that he felt sleepy and he left. Kamato then warns him not to get kicked out, but Shinobu recognizes Kuro as the invisible ninja who ended him. After knowing that fact, he flares up like he could do anything about it, and Kamato pets him. However, Kuro also finds the cat fishy, but Kamato invites him for drinks over at Onu's place at night. At an empty park, Kato welcomes Onikobe back home, and she tells him the recruit relieved her of duty. She then asks the battlefield she'd be sent to next, and Kato tells her that her next battle is where they're currently in. The next day at school, Ada is happy about the new world after his bullies have been dealt with. The news is Azuma made some excuse about being hospitalized, and we all know that's bullshit. Kuro then thinks that maybe his life is about to turn around, but soon he gets smacked in the head by Noheji. He then gets taken outside by Noheji, who looks like he's about to beat the living crap out of him. Ada then wonders if it's payback for the previous day, but to his surprise, he sees Noheji bowing to him and asking him to bring Kuro around. He tells Ada that he's aware Kuro is the one that hit him, and he is one of the ninjas one is not supposed to talk about in their country. He then asks Ada for help in meeting Kuro, and like a ghost, Kuro appears behind Ada. After seeing him, Noheji goes back on his knees and asks Kuro to help him in a fight against some guys from another school. In his naive mind, Ada thinks he's Kuro's priority, but gets shocked after Kuro asks Noheji for details. At the apartment, Kato knocks on Kuro's door, disguised as a delivery man. Onu then comes outside to inform him that Kuro isn't at home, and also offers to hold on to the package for him, since the broke ninja doesn't have a refrigerator. Kato then keeps Onu busy while Onikobe enters Kuro's room to scan the place for anomalies. During Kato's discussion with Kuro, he asks him how Kuro ended up moving into the apartment, but Onu doesn't have a definite answer to give him. Then, Kato realizes that he's been hypnotized to ensure that his memories of Kuro are hazy. On his way down, he checks Kamato's apartment, and she's sleeping with her mouth open as usual. At school, Noheji talks about how he grew up reading Gorilla Man and Bebop thanks to his dad, and Kuro admits he has read them too. Noheji then continues that he has always imagined a brawl with other guys from another school was just a dream, and as a result, he has been picking on weaklings like Ada instead, which is in no way satisfying. He then tells Kuro that there's a missing link in Narima, which is also a regular high school like theirs. Out of curiosity, Kuro asks where it is, and Noheji says it is the Narima Ward School, Yankee High. In the van, Kato asks Onikobe what she found out from Kuro's room. She then informs him that his tea table was an auto-deploying defense shield, and also installed beneath his floor, was a shelter capable of withstanding a bunker buster. She then tells him that the building possesses more secrets, but it doesn't pose any real threat because escape would be able to destroy it. Kato then asks about the residents, and she tells him they're normal civilians she could have in control in 3 minutes. Kato then points out that he usually lowers his guard when going into the apartment building because the residents are too easygoing and it's unnatural. They also don't portray any kind of presence, just like a jonin would. Onikobe then asks if he thinks the residents are Kuro's guards, but he tells her that he can't tell. But they're at war, and there's no telling what might happen. At school, Hibi makes a guest appearance, and Kuro asks him to join them in picking a fight with Yankee High School for no reason. Without question, Hibi agrees, but he asks Kuro if the school was hit with a laser the previous day, and Kuro tells him it was escape. Surprised by this, Hibi asks how he was able to make the call on top-secret ninja tech. Noheji, the fanboy, then asks Hibi if he's the legendary delinquent who single-handedly beat the ass of every punk in Nerima and Eastern Tokyo, Thunder Hibi. Hibi then tells him he's that guy, and Noheji tells him he was his hero in elementary school. Noheji then asks what he's doing in school since he's significantly older, but Hibi tells him not to ask any more questions because it's part of the job. At the other end, Ada wonders why Hibi and Kuro are making it obvious that they are a ninja. Hibi then asks Kuro if allowing the use of escape means their mission is a lot more dangerous than they thought, and Kuro tells him the command didn't give a second thought to blowing the whole school away. Hibi then tells them he wishes they had another reason for raiding the other high school, rather than it being random. As a motivation, Noheji tells them that someone's girl being stolen is a big one. Kuro then asks Ada about the girl he helped carry the box. In class, they show Yamada to Kuro, but she's kind of disgusting, which makes people keep their distance. Kudo then wonders if she'll cooperate by letting the punks get on her case, but to his surprise, she agrees without much convincing. In a convenience store, Ada buys a hair cream, so he can put his hair in a pompadour while they go to Yankee High, but he doesn't want to. He gets to the counter and the old lady attendant is all up in his business, and she asks about his mom. After looking at the hair cream, she asks if he's going on a date or something, but Ada is just uncomfortable at this point. Afterward, she tells him to make sure he's taking care of his mom, and she bids him goodbye. After he leaves, he wonders what in hell the old hag's deal is, and how he's asked his mom about her, but she didn't know either. Following that, an invisible ninja enters the store. After the invisible ninja enters the convenience store, the old lady tries to welcome her new customers, but she sees nobody through the CCTV. She then comes out of the convenience room to check, but the invisible ninja scatters some drinks on the floor, and the sound startles the old lady. Then, the ninja throws a shuriken at the old lady, but she splits it into two, with a katana she drew out of thin air. Confident in her skills, she tells the ninja to bring his best and let them both have some fun, which makes the ninja laugh hysterically. The lady then tries to analyze the situation in Kakashi style, but her skills are mid. She gets caught slipping by the ninja who cuts her by the neck. Meanwhile, after leaving the store, Ada wonders if he should go back to being a miserable shut-in, while Suzuki gets excited about reviewing Yoshida's manuscript again. She decides to cancel most of his chapters so she'd be able to visit him again, which is sort of a stalker move at this point. After being hit in a critical artery, the old lady uses her last strength to hit the invisible ninja with her katana, splashing her fluids on him in the process, and she collapses. The hit doesn't do much to the ninja, who stands up and laughs at her for being an old-school ninja and not putting up much of a fight. He then dispenses her fluids from his suit, and the lady realizes that the sound she heard from the other direction wasn't an illusion, but from a speaker installed in the shuriken. Without much thought, the ninja ends the old lady and claims that one of his targets is down. 1 month ago, a man was being chased down by a ninja, and soon he got hit by a flying shuriken. The ninja then asks him if he thought he could survive being a failure trying to flee his shinobi organization without a means to escape overseas. The man agrees with him, but tells him that he is betting on a rumor he heard. The ninja then removes the shuriken and asks if the rumor can defect to the UN and work for his organization. After realizing the ninja is from the UN, The man confessed that he didn't run because he wanted to survive, but because he'd rather die than live long enough for his ninja skills to fade away with age. He then tells him that he'll side with anyone as long as he gets to fight. The ninja then tells him he knows the perfect place for him, and hearing this makes the psychotic maniac happy. After finishing the old woman, he steps out of the convenience store and wonders who is next. At the apartment, Yoshida is happy in his well-deserved bath after finishing his manuscript, and he is also expecting a good night's sleep after a long time. However, his hope gets shattered after seeing Suzuki in his home unannounced. After seeing him in his towel, Suzuki freaks out and claims she doesn't know him that well yet. Yoshida then explains that he was in the bathroom and he asks what she's doing in his house. She then tells him that she has come to read his manuscript, and since his door was unlocked, she let herself in. That news comes as a shock to Yoshida because he's pretty sure he left his door locked, and also he is expecting a different editor. However, Suzuki, who's oozing stalker vibes, tells him she'll be his editor until her death. In Ada's home, Juna tells him that the convenience store lady was the one who went to the child welfare center on her behalf. After hearing that she's not a bad person, Ada then asks Juna why her nosy ass is in his house. She then tells him that he's the only one who can take him to the convenience store, because her mom hasn't arrived home. Ada then tells her that he just came from there, and he knows he just wants to use his money in the store because she's broke as hell. Juna then calls him cheap and tells him she'll go buy herself, and threatens to tell the police that he messed with her. On her way back, Suzuki is happy after rejecting most of poor Yoshida's manuscript, and now she can visit him on her way home the next day. Suddenly, she gets an emergency shinobi notice about an attack at a convenience store that ended the life of a shinobi. Suzuki recognizes the dead lady as one of their teachers, who she thought was immortal. The notice mentions complete invisibility, and she wonders if the UN is behind the attack. Not long after, she gets attacked by the invisible ninja, but she blocks his attack with her quick reflex and covers him with her shuriken net. She then realizes the ninja is invisible, and the suit is different from the downgrades Marashitten they let them use domestically. To make matters worse, Yuna, the annoying brat, runs into the scene and calls and recognizes Suzuki as the violent lady. Suzuki then tells her to run, but it's too late. The ninja already got to her. He then laughs like the maniac he is and attempts to slash the helpless girl. However, as the plot would have it, she bends down to pick up Shinobu and dodges the sword without even knowing. Suzuki then tells the ninja to let the girl go while she puts down her weapon, and she realizes she has lost track of the ninja after Juna distracted her. Luckily, she has a poison that has been developed by the ninja lab, and if she can tag the ninja with it, he'll die in 2 seconds. But that time is also enough for the ninja to end Juna. Strangely, Shinobu starts talking to the ninja in the shadows and asks if he is Saruta. The ninja also recognizes the Shinobu and calls him Nekohira. Amid the conversation, Juna tells Suzuki that the cat is talking funny, and she can also hear a man behind her for some reason. Suzuki then tells her not to move, and she deduces that the ninja is a dude, but she doesn't quite get the cat's deal. Saruta then grabs Juna's hair, and Suzuki tells him not to hurt her. However, she feels she can buy more time as long as he's got a hold of Juna. Then, Shinobu tells Saruta that Suzuki is the lady standing in front of them, but he says that her voice and face are different. Shinobu then tells him that she can easily change her appearance, but his nose wouldn't deceive him, since he's a sicko with a smell fetish. A flashback then shows Suzuki's days at the Ninja Academy, and a guy, who's supposedly Saruta, asks her to go out with him. However, she refuses, and claims that there's no telling what kind of ninja duty they'll be assigned to. After she leaves him rejected and dejected, Nekohira comes to tell him that he has just come up with a lame cat language. On the day of graduation, the principal presents Onikobe and Suzuki as the Kunoichi program's valedictorians. He then tells them that the two of them have used seduction arts over the years, resulting in 24 confessions for each of them, and none of the 48 idiots realize they have been tricked. Nekohira remembers the smug look on both their faces and tells Saruta to kill him while he still has his memories, but Saruta isn't listening to him. Unfortunately, he returns to cat mode and walks away. While still holding Juna hostage, Saruta tells Suzuki that he won't kill her there, but he'll be waiting for her at Kodan High School. He then drops Juna, who is in a foul mood, and walks away claiming that dying in a school would suit Suzuki more. At the convenience store, a Kaneki-looking female goes through the CCTV footage of the store and shows Taira the evidence left behind. He then asks her if the suit was built by the ninja lab, but she tells him that nothing exists in her department that can erase visibility for a sword so perfectly. In Kato's van, Onikobe warns Kato about the dangers of operating individually, but he's too stubborn for his good. She continues to warn him about the sudden emergency summons and how it could be a trap. She then offers to attend as his guard, but Kato tells her to be on standby. She then tells him that her Marashitan sensors are picking up multiple readings, and there are people in Marashitan surrounding them. However, Kato insists that she is to be on standby. On the way to the hideout, Ozu tells Kato about an overseas mission where they cleaned up a drug cartel, but things went south and they were trapped in wetlands with Commander Sasama. The Marashitan model at the time was 2.0, and it was so damn heavy on the fritz from the humidity. Then, the drug trafficking tunnels they were hiding in got lit up with a flamethrower, and everyone but the three of them died. The chit-chat starts to get on Kato's nerves, and he tells Ozu to quit it. Ozu then tells him that the Rainbow Hound is with them, and Kato's eyes lit up like headlights. He knows the Rainbow Hound as Kumogakure Nijiro, and if he's part of security, then there must be Jonin class around too. After a while, they reach the hideout and Kato greets Sasama. He then sees a person and wonders if the baby is Jonin. Suddenly, Taira puts a sword on his neck and asks him to explain why killings started to occur as soon as Onikobe was back working for him. However, Sasama tells Taira to lay down his sword. Meanwhile, at the parking spot, Suzuki tells Onikobe to come out to chat since they've not seen each other since graduation. She then comes out of the van invisible, but Suzuki asks if she's so scared of losing to her that she had to come out that way. Onikobe then accepts her challenge, and they start to fight. After a short while of clashing swords, Suzuki admits that Onikobe is stronger than her, being at the front lines and all. She then tells her about the invisible ninja that attacked her the night before, and Onikobe asks if she thinks it's her. Suzuki denies that, and tells her that the ninja knew she was infiltrating a school on a mission. She also suspects that he might be one of the idiots they caught with their honey trap project, and she asks Onikobe if she can think of anyone that would hate them. Onikobe then takes off her mask and tells her that there are lots of prospects, but she'll end them if they come close to her. Her attitude doesn't surprise Suzuki, who thinks that she hasn't changed after all. After the reunion, the two check out their graduation photo, which they just happened to still have, but they couldn't recognize anyone due to the masks. Onikobe then remembers Nekohira, who confessed to her using cat talk, and Suzuki also remembers Saruta, who had a cowardly look on his face. Suzuki then informs Onikobe about the existence of a new suit deployed by the UN. Both girls then decide to fight and end the ninja together. At the hideout, Sasama asks Kato whose orders he's following, and Kato says that he now understands why she has brought with her someone higher ranked than a Jonin. Sasama then tells them that the baby is one of the 7 Nyan officers, Tara. The news shocks Ozu, who has already given the baby head pats, thinking he was Sasama's baby. Now he's about to lose his hand. Sasama then continues that the surgery hasn't been long, so they'll have to wait till he's able to converse well. Through this, Kato realizes that the Ninja Lab has been able to perfect the brain transplant technology, not only on animals but on humans too. Sasama then tells Kato it doesn't matter if he's been taking orders from someone else, or he has been making decisions on his own. All she needs to do is ask the functional head of NIN to learn the truth. However, she knows that he's not someone that would crack under NIN torture, so she decides to overlook his wrongdoings. But in exchange, she wants him to demonstrate his loyalty to NIN. She then asks him to crawl between the Rainbow Hound's legs. Back at the parking spot, Onikobe and Suzuki have been surrounded by invisible ninjas, and Suzuki blames Onikobe for dragging her into her problem. At that moment, they both wonder if they should fight each other or be the hostage. However, Suzuki thinks there's a chance the NIAN will use escape if they decide to attack the school, and she'll die either way. She then decides to survive by all means possible, all for her Yoshida-sensei not to be sad. Yamada and Ada arrive at Yankee High, which scares Ada. Yamada reaches her hand to lead him. Ada takes the hand, but he's suddenly pulled up and carried behind her back, making him grab her melons. Yamada in turn screams while carrying him, instigating a scenario in which Ada is latched onto her. Ada is very shocked about this, but his adventurous mind decides to look on the positive side of things, that he gets to be carried by the hottest girl in his school. He later becomes disappointed that reality is harsher than his expectations. Not quite long, someone comes out to deal with the situation. He asks what they are doing. Before the mini gorilla can react, Yamada turns to Bruce Lee's cousin and flips Ada over, hitting the man. Ada can't shake the feeling that he has entered something extremely dangerous. In another place, Ran works overnight back at her lab. This will make it 3 nights in a row, and might as well start paying rent. Tyra walks up to her to see how things are going. She analyzes the UN's invisibility suits, and admits their gear outperforms their Marashiten in every way. She explains to her manager Tyra that considering their Marashiten is on 4.0, then the UN is on 5.0. Tyra asks if their gear has any weaknesses, which she replies no. She further explains that the latest model of Marashiten, 4.0, was designed with a focus on mobility, with domestic usage in mind. It's a lightly armed model, and its bullet and blade proofing are not that strong. So basically, it's great for dodging chores, but not so much for dodging bullets. Compared to the 3.5, a heavy armor type developed for use during a war, its design principles are different. And then there's the UN's new model, which has all the strengths of both, but none of the weaknesses. Yamada wonders how the enemy's tech manages to outdo theirs. She proceeds to explain further by using CCTV videos taken from the Ninja Lab's Rappa supercomputer. One of the videos shows the suit takes a super high-strength ninja sword, but its impact protection system is strong enough that it doesn't even leave a scratch. It even maintains its invisibility. Manager Tyra asks her to update the front lines with intel. She agrees and says she's about to send the data to Chief Ninja Kato, but she regrets she might not be able to send it in time for the UN attack because she can handle advanced tech but can't meet a deadline to save her life. She expresses hope that Onakobe dies in the rising situation. Overcome with thoughts, she wonders how the UN's invisibility suit is overspec, like it has some other purpose. At the embassy, Ozu calls Hachiya through a phone call to inform him of an NIN alert, so Kodan High School is about to become a combat zone. Ozu asks him to respond to the situation, even though he admits he wouldn't have asked him in a normal situation. Hachiya agrees, and adds that considering whose grandson he is, it is important for him to show up in the field so the other genin don't get unruly, because nothing says leadership like nepotism. Ozu, as a bitch, he advises him to run from an enemy if he encounters any. He also asks him to use the rear support maneuvers Division Girl 2 as a shield, to which Hachiya agrees. It doesn't surprise him how Ozu manages to accurately pinpoint that he is with Clownface. The phone call ends, and Ozu says to himself how important Hachiya is to him getting promoted. He later reveals that Hachiya is the grandson of Tara, one of the 7 nin leaders. Suzuki is on a phone call with Ran, and registers her displeasure with the amount of gas Ran pumped into the message about how good the enemy's weapons are. She asks Ran for weaknesses, but Ran replies that there are none. The call is interrupted by a grumpy old teacher in the school, reprimanding her that phones are prohibited on school grounds. Suzuki senses that this man is not Yoshida, but he's rugged too, like a soldier who lost his tooth in a war. She lies to him that her grandmother is about to die, and she just has to talk to her. The man then permits her to use the phone, but does not make it too obvious. Back to their phone call, she scares the teacher with the slurs she keeps uttering while referring to Ran. Ran admits to Suzuki that Nin is at a complete technological disadvantage because of its uselessness. She also tells Suzuki that she's the only one who's ever fought the new UN suit and survived. She also tells her it's not a coincidence she dodged the first strike. Ran also asks her if she noticed anything in terms of smell. Ranran digresses and asks about Onikobe. After hearing she's around, she curses her and hopes she dies in the school, triggering a death flag. Onikobe asks Suzuki if Ranran hates her, and she casually replies that she took out Ranran's eye, so it should be a given. She has lost an eye but has a grudge with a clear view. Onikobe in turn felt like she did it due to the annoying nature of the bitch. She receives a transmission inside her suit visor from Kato. He asks if she is in a position, to which they reply affirmatively. Kato tells them that killing the enemy is their only priority, and they should not consider trying to keep them alive. He also reveals to them that whatever their actions will be, it won't make them stand before the ninja tribunal, and that the rules of engagement have been lifted. Kato operates what seems to be a robot made of cardboard, and tells them he'll be joining them. The son of Azuma, the former Narima assemblyman, curses Ada, and plans to bully him again that day. As he crosses the road to his school gate, he walks past an invisible ninja who does a clean sweep with his katana and makes a Ned Stark reference out of him. Before passing on, the boy wonders why he can see his own back. The ninja feels happy for being able to keep his cool while pulling it off. He then believes to be a ninja that will be known in history if he manages to get 100 heads. He walks past the boy's body, who is still standing, and enters into the school compound while being invisible. Noguchi engages in a little chat with the school director because of the awkwardness of their situation. The director realizes to himself that both NIN and Rear Support Maneuvers Division 2 have given up on the place. He reveals to Noguchi about caves that have entrances on the school grounds. He asks her to use them to escape. He adds that the campus is already surrounded, and it'd be dangerous to leave any other way. Finally, he asks her to survive and tell other students about the situation and how doomed they are. Ranran shares troubling news with Suzuki about a decapitated student, cautioning that the UN has already arrived at the scene. In a strategic move, she urges Suzuki to place a GPS marker on the UN during their upcoming operation, enabling Escape to execute a precise and devastating bombing attack. A man's voice echoes through the students' locker room, urgently announcing that lunch break is over and urging anyone present to clear out. As he turns to leave, his gaze falls upon an unusual figure lurking in the shadows. Curiosity overriding caution, he moves closer to investigate, only to be swiftly attacked by the Invisible Man, putting an end to his foolishness. The Invisible Man continues walking up to the school. He encounters two girls bullying another male student, Fatty Take. The girls bully him because he ordered a bun wrong. The boy explains that by the time the lunch break is over, the most poppy stuff is already sold out. As they continue their scuffle, a decapitated head rolls to them, shocking them. One of the girls questions if Nin is on the school campus and asks the other girl to contact Mako. Just as the other girl was about to make contact, she was attacked. The first girl seeing this was shocked, and as fast as usual, the Invisible Man hit her from the back and asked the boy to run away first girl, piggybacking on him. The Invisible Man says the first step is to sow chaos in the school. In a flashback to when he was being bullied, Nekohira claimed that if he became a jonin, he would ban the use of cats as weapons. Saruta asked him candidly if he honestly thought he could make yonin. They were interrupted by a bully who threatened them to go buy hydrogen, or else they were dead. Saruta enters a classroom filled with students and begins his rampage like a maniac. He kills some students in the classroom. He escapes to the boys' restroom, where he meets a boy panicking. Saruta tries to kill him, but ultimately decides not to, because he notices the student is having his lunch in the toilet, escaping his bullies. Fatty Take, despite his considerable size and weight, somehow manages to carry the girl on his back as he rushes into the faculty room, his panicked breaths echoing in the tense atmosphere. While her fate remains uncertain, with the possibility that she may already be dead, Fatty Take wastes no time in recounting the harrowing ordeal to the bewildered school officials. He describes in vivid detail the relentless rampage of an unseen assailant, an invisible specter of terror indiscriminately claiming students' lives throughout the school. The students are filled with panic. The vice principal of the school makes a public announcement that the students are to evacuate to the courtyard for safety reasons. Suzuki claims this is exactly what Saruta wants. Then suddenly, An unknown voice takes control of the public announcement and denounces everything the vice principal has said. He claims there is no intruder and asks the students to remain in their classrooms. A message is delivered to Nin by the director. He tells Saruta that the UN has moved to a different building. The message asks Nin to pincer him unless he'll get away. He advises them that if they plan on working together, they should head to the blackboard eraser cleaning station in the hall. Suzuki asks X if he wants them to team up, to which he replies they don't have a choice. Onikobe adds that it's been 20 years since he was sent out on loan from Nin to the Ministry of Welfare's Rear Support Maneuvers Division 2. They can't tell whose side he is on anymore. X reveals to Suzuki that her ability to search for the enemy on the school grounds will be limited. Suzuki asks him why he is a Nukanin who's been allowed to live in public for 20 years. He explains that watching out for children as they grow up became his reason for living. He tells them he'll be backing them up with his ears. They relay all this to Kaito, who is already headed there. Saruta now knows the clairaudience user and Nin agents have linked up. Kuro, Hibi, and the other two students walk up to the school and meet a scared Noheji. He greets them, but Kuro says he doesn't care to know about his name because he is a nobody. He tells them their name and is immediately warmed up by Kuro, given the rarity of his name. He then shows Kuro their guidance counselor, who Kawarada knocked out. Keith shouts from the rooftop, with his hands tied behind his back. He begs them to save him, in a throwback to Yamada's childhood. She's woken up in a tight bathroom. She has no idea how long she has been there. When morning arrives, she leaves her room painstakingly walking up some stairs. She keeps climbing until she loses track of how long it has been. Reaching the top, a bunch of kids gruesomely fight one another. If you're weak, you just get beat on like a pathetic loser. She notes how the kids back then get trampled upon for not being strong enough to defend themselves. Like a tournament, the kids are made to beat themselves up till their opponent stops moving. After the day is over, they are returned to their rooms if they can still move, and the process repeats itself the following day. Like groups of venomous insects kept in a drum, the children move from using fists to using weapons. They repeat the process till one is determined a winner. At that time, Yamada happened to win. Meanwhile, in Kodan High, the ninja makes a lot of corpses with his blade and causes a frenzy in the school. The case has Ranran studying like she's going to take the SAT exams. The school director tries calming the situation, returning to Kuro, who happens to be at the entrance of Yankee Academy. He sees an unconscious grunt not far from him, and is informed that the man is a second Dan in karate. Ada then calls their attention as he screams from the roof at the top of his lungs, like a lost goat desperately searching for its herd, begging to be saved. Despite the chaotic scene, Kuro maintains an air of calmness and nonchalance, which catches Ada off guard, considering the circumstances. Kuro turns to Noheji and tells him that until they get the roof, he'd like to discuss his family name in detail. Meanwhile, Kato makes his grand entrance onto the school grounds. He sees a lot of similar vehicles parked by the school gate and does the same. Immediately, he sets his low-budget interstellar card box-looking bot out of the vehicle. The clairaudience manages to put a damper on the students' panic by denouncing the presence of an intruder, which annoys Saruta. A random fodder stares out of the class window and spots the robot. Saruta, who happens to be invisible, calls the bot a cube. As soon as the fodder hears, he tries looking around for where the voice came from and gets struck down by the ninja, causing commotion in the class. Since Saruta has found out that Nin is on the move, he anticipates his fight with Onikobe and says he doesn't mind dying in the process. For the time being, he makes himself happy by wallpapering his prey's blood across the walls and floors of the school. Upon entering the school compound, Kuro and his companions are greeted by a peculiar sight. A group of first-year students arranged neatly in 2 rows, mirroring each other in poses depicting see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil. The fastest way to make you guys relate to this is by asking you to remember the monkeys at the temple in Sekiro. Intrigued, the 2 larger, less tactful students accompanying Kuro attempt to engage the first years, bombarding them with questions about the unusual display. However, much to their frustration, the first years remain steadfastly silent, offering no explanation for their behavior. Kuro and Hibi walk up the stairs. Hibi tells Kuro that he wants to fight the UN first. Claiming he wants to see how far he can go, he thinks he's all that. Kuro then sends Noheji off, but he claims he has no clue of what's going on. Kuro and Hibi continue their walk upstairs till they get to the rooftop where Yamada and Eita are. Eita expresses his anxiety about the fight coming. Kuro calms him down and urges him to regain his composure. He adds that he doesn't want the UN to choke him. Hibi wonders if they should dress in their ninja outfits since they are going against someone powerful. Kuro then says he is free to do as he wishes since it'll be his only time in the spotlight. Yamada, who happens to be bored to death by the guy's antics, calls for their attention, asking them what they are doing. She then tells them the fight has already started at Kodan High School. Hibi is surprised that he couldn't sense her all this while. She asks them who wants to go first in fighting her, adding she doesn't mind taking on the two of them. At the same time in Kuro's apartment, Kawato engages in a conversation with an AI bike. The bike asks her to detach it from its frame and start up its engine. She questions the bike as to why it couldn't start its engine by itself. If it's so smart, why can't it kickstart? Shinobu, her cat, tells the bike he wants to ride the bike. Kawato observes that her cat has been particularly chatty lately. She is also confused and asks the bike if it understands cats. The bike says it's an AI and understands the cat. Kawato asks the bike what the cat is saying, but the bike tells her it's confidential and can't disclose it. Kawato then proceeds to start up the bike, but she is surprised that the motorcycle uses a rope start. The bike tells her it's what the latest models are all equipped with. The cat then hops on it, and together they move across the street. An unimportant character spots them and wonders if he truly saw a talking bike being ridden by a cat. The drunkard waves them goodbye, despite not knowing what in the frigging hell is going on. Back at the high school. Some students are surprised by the robot. As some find it to be cool, the girls downplay it since it's made out of cardboard boxes. Another student even speculates that it may be the third years that made it for the culture festival. The students are also curious about all the delivery trucks packed at their school gates. Kato, who happens to be in one of them, repositions his vehicle and opens the remote weapons system. He instructs the weapon to fire on anyone who leaves the building, including even a fly, with no warning shot. A public announcement in the school urges all the students in the halls to return to class at once, or else they get blown off into dust. Meiko asks Hachiya if the enemy coming is his, and also asks if they should escape. He responds that they cannot, since Nin has put a barricade around the perimeter, trapping them. He then suggests the building they are in to be safer. As for Meiko, she tells him about calling her friends to protect him, but Hachiya says that won't be possible because he got a message that her friends are dead. The dude uses his teddy to pass a serious info. If I were the girl, I'd smack him across the face. But being a lover bird, she keeps her cool and talks about how joining Rear Support Maneuvers Division 2 means being prepared for any outcome. She admits that even though they were just a ragtag team, not great friends or anything, she still wants to avenge them. She thinks she's the female John Wick. As she pulls out her knife, her face transforms into an abridged Kyoshi from The Last Airbender. The director informs Suzuki and others about movements in the southern building, an attack near 4, where students fled from. He also commends Kato for placing a robot to prevent the enemy from cutting directly across. He adds that he will inform them of any further movements. Onikobe tells Suzuki there are 2 connecting halls, so they have 50 odds, and she adds that the best move is to try to pin him down between them. Lastly, she mentions that dividing their strength could make them both fail. Suzuki asks Onikobe to back her up as soon as she finds him. They then run in opposite directions. As Suzuki walks amid some students, some of them spot her to be a foreigner and find her cute. Unknown to them that her hypersensitive nose has given them a bad review. The good side is that it doesn't discriminate on genders, so it hates equally. One of the school officials comes out and tells the students that the teachers are trying to confirm whether or not this intruder report is real. He also asks the students to go back to their classrooms. One of them questions him about the mini Micha outside the building, but the teacher calls it some sort of protocol. The blonde bitch, who happily sees the geezer, tries to get a whiff of the old fart, but Onikobe rushes in. She alerts Suzuki of Saruta's presence, and before the geezer can complete his sentence, another Ned Stark reference is made out of him. Immediately, Suzuki tries to fight back, but Saruta reacts faster than her and takes off her left foot. The psychopath then tells Suzuki that he'll come for her later. For now, he plans to dine with his major prey, Onikobe. As soon as Onikobe hears him, she closes her eyes and parries the loony's attack. Upon contact with Onikobe, Kaito and Ranran make arrangements, and they send the robot inside to deal with Saruta. The robot picks Saruta up by the neck, like a turkey prepared for Thanksgiving, while Suzuki tends to her injury. Laughing like a maniac, Saruta expresses joy that the strongest war machine, the cube, is being used to apprehend him. Like a detective, he deduces that a Chunin at least is required to operate the machine, which means that if Onikobe is in the Marashiten, then Kaito is the one controlling the machine. The robot grabs Saruta tightly and takes him away, but the psycho manages to injure Onikobe's foot. As it heads to a different hallway, it sees a lot of students, so it does the leap of faith down the stairs and grips Saruta like a deranged tree hugger. Meanwhile, Onikobe carries Suzuki's foot to meet her, and says it's still fixable if she gets to the ninja lab on time. Suzuki in turn explains that it will be difficult, since they are trapped by their men. As for Onikobe, she has Mako's type of dagger shot in her leg and happens to bleed badly from the injury. Meanwhile, at the base of the staircase, Kaito asks Ranran to hurry up and use escape on Saruta, but she explains that she is facing complications due to the procedures. She then asks him to take Saruta outside the building, but the psychopath manages to escape. Hibi gears up to fight Yamada. Kuro comforts him that Yamada is still a human and can be killed. Hibi walks up to see her and challenges them to fight hand-to-hand, which she accepts. Hibi launches a rising kick attack, which she expertly dodges. He launches subsequent attacks, and like Spider-Man on steroids, she dodges them all. She counters and returns her attacks, which lands Hibi on his loser ass. She tells him to stand up and take his time. Kuro also urges him to stay cool, adding that Yamada is relaxed enough to start doing radio calisthenics. He also advises him that he can't beat her without fully committing, and that he should treat this fight like an educational experience. Hibi affirms his advice. Hibi gets his ass up and squares with Yamada again, thinking the next outcome will be different. He proposes they go chest to chest for this lesson, but she rejects, saying a lady's chest is a precious thing. That's highly debatable given that the scum Ada was allowed to press it. Hibi then asks them to perform a test of strength because he thinks his arms are stronger. Surprisingly, Yamada agrees and they set off for the test. Initially, Hibi boasts about how he's the stronger one and he's going to beat her. But to his surprise, Yamada gets the better of him and starts to pin his pathetic ass down. Losing, Hibi suddenly changes and reveals to Yamada that she fell for his trick. He then proceeds to pass electricity that's strong enough to light up New York through her. Electricity still flowing through Hibi and Yamada. Kuro questions if it will be enough to bring her down. Sadly, the electricity doesn't work, and Yamada yawns through it. She then counters and tries to finish off Hibi, as she homes in on his head. His life flashes before his eyes, but instead of getting a glimpse of the pearly gates, he sees his master's bald head, with light shining on it like the horizon. Since he has plot protection, Yamada immediately stops and apologizes, stating she is not supposed to kill him. She calls for Kuro next, but the brat asks her to wait while using a monotone voice like a robot. Back in Kodan High, Noguchi and Sato walk across their school hallways, seeing blood across their paths. Sato has a camera in her hand and tells Noguchi she wants to capture something for their school newspaper and leave it to a journalist to find a story amid chaos. Sato then asks Noguchi why she left the class, but tells her the director told her to run in the direction that had the fewest people. He also instructed her to follow the orders from the blackboard eraser cleaner, which brought her there. She wonders if the director had probably put some kind of radio in it. Noguchi also tells Sato things have been weird ever since Kuro came to her room that night. As they trail the blood, They find the injured Suzuki on the floor. She begs like a little bitch for them to help lift her around. Noguchi is left with no choice but to do as she is told, and even though she sucks at it, she handles it like a man. Or so I thought. This bitch calls for Sato in no time to lend a hand, but Suzuki refuses, citing that Sato will be recording everything that happens. Suzuki continues that it's better to lean on the girl who is at the top of the class caste system, despite not being hot or charming, and then let it all slip through her fingers. This annoys Noguchi, but she is interrupted by Sato, who rushes to take a picture of them. After a while, all three manage to make it to the gym. Suzuki then asks Sato to take a picture of her beautiful face racked with pain. Suddenly, a fire extinguisher talks to them and congratulates them on making it safely. It then directs them to a door inside the room across from the stage. Noguchi explains that it's the director talking through the fire extinguisher, adding that he also has different stuff set up all over the school, something only weirdos do. She admits that as creepy as it may seem, it came in handy this time. The director tells them the fire extinguisher is wireless and asks them to take it along, for their sake, and hope the battery lasts as long as the plot. Noguchi, the lowest of the trio, is bullied into taking the fire extinguisher while carrying Suzuki. She is the backbone of her team, and I know for sure that her back will hurt due to the hard carrying. Through the fire extinguisher, the director takes them to a small door behind the stairs. They open the door and find a stairway leading underground. He urges them to move inside immediately and go down if they want to leave the school alive. The girls walk down the stairs and discover it's directly beneath the gymnasium. The director warns them that if escape attacks, they will still be caught in the blast. He tells them to keep moving. Noguchi asks what escape is. Suzuki explains to her that escape is a top-secret orbital weapons platform run by NIAN. She adds that anybody who knows about it tends to disappear, along with their entire families. They are sent to the great beyond, so she's better off not knowing. Noguchi is scared shitless and yells at Suzuki for telling her. Suzuki then calms her down and assures her of her survival if they manage to make it out alive. Almost triggered a death flag. The director tells them that getting to the closest exit will take them 30 minutes at their pace. He asks if they can last that long. Suzuki gently snaps back at the director, calling him an enemy. The director defends himself like Prime Maldini, that they were all the same organization before the war. Bro continues rambling on and loses over 1,000 points of his aura. Suzuki replies that it's a long time ago. The director continues that his father was one of the shinobi in favor of continuing the war. He also claims he has been influenced by his father, for better or for worse. Suzuki responds that it's because the warmongers went underground and kept up a pointless resistance that the world of shinobi still doesn't know peace. Back in the school building, Hachiya sneaks around with Meiko. Mako urges them to find the director. Hachiya then asks Meiko about the connection between her organization and the director, and she explains that the director is like a satellite unit, except he's an individual. He doesn't mind his business. As Suzuki and the others press on with their evacuation through the underground tunnel, Sato turns to Suzuki with a question. She wonders if the world of ninjas was divided into two factions after the war, leading to animosity between the two sides. Suzuki nods in agreement, confirming Sato's observation about the divided nature of the ninja world post-war. This gives Noguchi more screen time to play the Tsukomi role. Hachiya asks Meiko why the director has been there for decades. She replies that Nyan would know more about it. She further explains that the school used to be a facility for the Japanese army. It was an underground laboratory for the organization that would become NIN, as well as a communication hub for the UN. It's hallowed ground for all three organizations. Noguchi asks Suzuki about the underground tunnels. Suzuki explains that they are a secret escape route used by the Under Ninja. He also mentions that the tunnels contain the remains of a hidden workshop. This adds to the mystery surrounding their purpose. Meiko presumes any guard for that kind of place would need ties to all three organizations. This makes Hachiya suspect the director has ties to the UN too. Saruta, in his invisible state, shows up to them, although they can sense him. Meiko asks Hachiya to stay behind her. She resents the inability she has that day. but she promises to do whatever it takes to absorb Saruta's attack. She then asks Hachiya to use that chance to escape. Saruta mocks Hachiya for hiding behind a girl. Saruta reveals his target is Hachiya. He then leaps forward to attack them, but Hachiya parries his attack. Saruta tries to attack him again, but Hachiya dodges it and uses Saruta's shoulder to jump away. The surprised man asks how the future nin leader was able to pull such a risky move. Rather than him saying it's convenient writing, he says the stench of blood gave him away and even speaks about nighttime CQB training. Hachiya then questions the psycho to know who put him up to this. Saruta laughs and notes how incredible it is for a lowlife like him to be talking with someone as important as Hachiya, saying that's how fast life can change. During his relentless talking, he discovers that escape has locked onto him through Hachiya's teddy bear. Saruta claims he's bluffing, and that Nin won't fire where Hachiya is right there. Hachiya corrects him that he does not understand how ruthless Nin can be. In orbit, escape gears up and it's ready to fire. Ozu, who happens to be at the embassy, screams and asks Ranran not to fire, claiming Hachiya is right there. Ranran tells him that she's not authorized to do such, since it can only be carried out by the Jonin. Ozu, who doesn't want to lose his chance at being promoted, wonders if Hachiya is deliberately being cut off since his grandfather's brain has successfully been transplanted. Saruta, who happens to have his back turned against Mako, gets shot in the leg with her knife after being ordered by Hachiya. He then decides to go in for the kill, like the final boss in Sekiro, but is blocked by Saruta, who manages to parry the attack. Saruta then runs towards Mako, enacting vengeance on the high schooler before jumping through the window. Due to the psycho turning tails away from the scene, Escape's firing sequence automatically shuts down. Ozu breathes a sigh of relief. Hachiya moves to comfort the already stained Mako, thanking her for saving his life. He also asks her to watch over him until the day he is the leader of the Seven. Suzuki and the girls find a tunnel filled with concrete, and Suzuki tells them stories of where the tunnels used to lead. They decide to take a break because they are tired, or maybe they're just lazy. Sato asks Suzuki what the workshop made, but she asks the director to answer her. Suzuki says the tunnels were made to manufacture counterfeit bills. She explains that during the 1980s, during the bubble economy, people were down there creating counterfeit money. She also adds that there's a theory that suggests that's how the bubble eventually burst. The director adds that a serious battle ensued when Nyan discovered the tunnels, leading to the loss of lives. He then reveals that being the sole survivor of the encounter made him tangential across all three organizations and made him the guard keeper of the place. Suzuki adds that the tunnel only being used for making counterfeit money still sounds suspicious. As Kato maneuvers the robot, his keen eye catches sight of blood droplets, a sign that Saruta is wounded. Filled with concern, Kato directs his attention to Onikobe, who is nursing her injuries, and urges her to join him on the roof, where he suspects Saruta might be hiding. Kuro squares off with Yamada. He uses the ring given to him to request the sword which is delivered to him through a drone. Hibi is surprised that Kuro finally takes up a sword. The man who lent him the katana wishes for him to avenge Hachiro. Back to Kuro, he reveals that he silently shot Yamada with a poison dart during her earlier fight with Hibi, but the dart didn't work. He sizes her build and sees that she looks like someone who didn't skip leg day at the gym. Yamada, being a copycat cat, gets her sword delivered to her through a missile drone. Kuro, wearing invisibility gear, makes his upper body invisible, although his face and nose still stick out. Meanwhile, the cat and the bike race towards the school, encountering various obstacles along the way. They skillfully navigate through these challenges, determined to reach the rooftop. However, their progress comes to a halt when they encounter a locked door blocking their path. The cat feels frustrated and suddenly begins to lose his human memories. Onikobe, wincing with each step due to her injuries, slowly ascends the stairs, her determination propelling her forward as she heads towards Saruta. Kuro, who feels like Samurai Jack, unsheaths his sword while Yamada does the same. He calculates that his best chance is to cut her head off, even though he knows that Yamada is probably thinking the same. He also relies on his camouflage, lowering her chances of landing a fatal blow. Dripping with blood, Onikobe makes it to the stairs. She spots Saruta's blood on the floor and traces it to where she thinks it is. She sees Saruta's invisibility suit. Kato, using the robot, climbs up to the rooftop. He analyzes the suit and discovers that it's empty and it's a trick to lure her in. He tries to warn Onikobe that it's a trap, but it's too late. Onikobe rushes in like a fool to attack the suit, and just as she is about to deal her attack, Saruta, now in normal clothes, jumps in, make a surprise attack using Mako's projectile knife. But Onikobe is as quick too. She uses her visor as a shield, suppressing the knife attack from piercing her head, while she's successful in penetrating Saruta with her sword. She's relieved, and Kato congratulates her for her efforts. Just as they thought all was won, Saruta, like a maniac, releases the knife projectile, shooting it across Onikobe's face, killing her, and designing the floor with her blood. Ran reports to manager Taira. She analyzed the fight situation between Onikobe and Saruta. She shows him how Onikobe attacks the empty suit. Taira asks her if she had watched the whole time. She would have seen the UN take the suit off. Why didn't she notify Onikobe? She claims that her mission is to analyze the UN suit. She continues that she had previously thought the suit was a weaponized NBC protective suit. But between the anti-UV membrane in the goggles and the attachment for an optional storage unit in the bank, she now thinks the UN suit is a modified spacewalk suit. She shows Taira a news report of the UN launching a rocket without satellites on board, claiming they forgot to. Taira now knows the UN is actually after Escape. Ran adds that the UN's true goal is the data server that contains the personal information of all 20,000 of NIN's shinobi. She says the reason it's said to be 100% secure is because it's stored inside Escape, which is both in space and invisible. Kato, operating the robot like low-budget Tony Stark, grabs both Onikobe and Saruta's bodies. He tells Ran that he's locked in the UN and asks if they can bomb him already. Ran urges Taira to recommend that the 500 Ninja Committee destroy Escape immediately. She says the UN might seize control of Escape while they are stealing the data. In outer space, a figure from the UN appears upon Escape. One of the Ninja Committee members explains to the other that the UN is already upon Escape and warns that both Escape's store of NIN agent data and control of the satellite are lost. She then advises them to self-destruct the satellite. The other committee members call it ridiculous, emphasizing how expensive Escape is, and they are too broke to make another one. She urges them that if they make a decision immediately before confirmation is made, it will be possible to protect the personal data of all 20,000 NIN operatives. During their discussion, an intruder alert is sounded confirming that there's a UN intruder on board Escape. The committee commands Escape to fire at maximum output and ensure the cooling mechanism is disabled. This will ensure the intruder inside is cooked alive, and if it doesn't work, they should self-destruct it. The intruder inside Escape swiftly catches on to the situation, understanding that he has been caught in the act. Fearing capture, he accelerates his efforts to download the sensitive information, aiming to complete the process before facing consequences. Kuro and Yamada start their fight and launch their first attacks. Kuro manages to cut off Yamada with his strike, while Yamada manages to cut him across his torso. She then launches her second attack on Kuro's head, but he manages to parry it with his sword. The parrying is not too successful, as the extent of the force still manages to cause damage to his head. Kuro bleeds on top of his head and from his eyes. He goes down on his knees, thinking he's not him, and says he couldn't pull it off. Yamada then deals the final and fatal blow by striking him across his face with her sword, a minute before Kuro is killed. Saruta reveals to Kato that he saw something when he became a nuke and made contact with the UN. He saw the disguise of Commander Sasama behind the graves, hiding like a chicken. Finally, Escape fires at the high school, striking Saruta first, then spreading to every angle of the school. Ozu asks to contact the governor and have him set up a disaster response task force. He also adds that the governor uses script A22 for the media, cops, and fire department, and that they should lie to the public that the explosion was caused by a massive buildup of methane gas in the sewers. The attacks destroy every area of the school, and everybody around, too. As Suzuki and the other girls complete their escape through the tunnel, and approach the exit. Suzuki turns to Nato and asks her to use her camera to document the ongoing situation. Nato quickly focuses her lens, capturing every detail as they emerge from the tunnel into the open. Ada, still on the rooftop, asks himself if the explosion is what Kuro warned him about. Yamada surprisingly walks up to him, which surprises him. He screams and asks what happened to her nose and why she's holding a human head in her hands. Suzuki, Noguchi, and Nato breathe a sigh of relief as they successfully make it out of the tunnel. They watch in awe as the explosion cloud billows and fills the sky, a dramatic and surreal sight. Taira is sweating like a ram being offered for sacrifice. Ranran asks him what happened with Escape. He tells her Escape's orbit is decaying and it's on close for atmospheric re-entry, which means it's destroyed. She also speculates that the UN has acquired Nyen's data from the server. Taira doesn't think so, and says there's no confirmation of any large bandwidth transmission from Escape, but there's a good chance a landing unit containing some kind of storage medium may have gotten away. He also adds that the 7 Nin leaders have assembled at the Grand Ninja Command to assume operational control, which means Nin has officially transitioned to a war footing. 5 of the 7 leaders meet together to blow up. They are so old, they should be in a retirement home, not blowing up satellites. The loss of Escape means Nin loses its decisive advantage over the UN. Taira tells Ranran that with the potential loss of the personal data, anyone about Chunin will be brought in for the response, forcing all of them to abandon their current missions. He then gives Ranran a field promotion from Genin to Chunin. He also tells her that her brother Hibi Miracle is alive. Back to where Kuro was killed, Hibi covers his face and says no one should see him like this. He mourns his death, and then notices Kuro is holding something in his hand. He opens his hand and sees Yamada's cut nose. Hibi rejoices and commends Kuro for actually pulling it off. The nose is later sent to the ninja's lab, and Ranran is asked to make a forensic analysis of it. Taira also discloses to Ranran that Onakobe is dead. Kato, her direct supervisor, is being put before a ninja tribunal. Back in Kuro's room, Ono, Kawato, and Eita talk about the explosion and how it was heard everywhere. Ada also narrated what went down between Yamada and Kuro. He also mentions how Yamada carried Kuro's decapitated head like a watermelon. This makes Kawato laugh because she doesn't believe it. Ono asks about Kuro's funeral, but Kawato tells him the cops announced the funeral is going to be for relatives only. All 3 reminisce about their encounter with Kuro that morning and can't believe he didn't make it to the night. Later that night, Kawato fools Ada into touching Ono's chest. The fool complains due to being tricked. Not long after, someone who looks very much like Kuro comes by the door and asks them to keep it down. They think he's Kuro, but say he's not calling himself Kumogakure Juniro, Kuro's brother. Kawato comforts him about his brother's death, but he says he doesn't feel attached to him. A news report came up that night showing the great aftermath of the explosion in the school. The news also confirms the death of Kuro, who died at the age of 24. Noguchi attempts to settle down and rest, but her peace is disrupted as she feels someone crawling up to her. The intruder introduces herself as Kumogakure Toichi, revealing that she is Kuro's sister. Later that night, as Juniro reviews the clip of Kuro's death, someone tells him no matter how many times he looks, Kuro is still dead. He accepts that the facts don't change, but believes that they can change the future by learning from what has happened. The person talking to Juniro is revealed to be Juro Nisan, or rather Tensan,